Mississauga Lakeshore.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to join the second reading debate on Private Member's Bill C-375, an act to amend the Criminal Code, pre-sentence reports. This bill seeks to address the issue of mental health, Mr. Speaker, in the criminal justice system through a targeted amendment to the Criminal Code provision governing pre-sentence reports. Specifically, the bill would clarify that a pre-sentence report should, where possible, contain information about any mental disorder from which an offender suffers, as well as any mental health care programs available to them. Mr. Speaker, I'm in full agreement with the sponsor on the fact that the issue of mental health is of great concern to the criminal justice system. It has been identified as a key concern by many criminal justice stakeholders over the years. As part of our commitment to broadly review the criminal justice system in Canada, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Justice has indicated that addressing the needs of vulnerable offender populations in the criminal justice system is a key priority. Addressing the issue of mental health is also part of the Minister of Justice's mandate letter from the Prime Minister. Specifically, her mandate directs her to address gaps in services for those with mental illness throughout the criminal justice system. The issue of mental health has arisen numerous times so far in the course of the Minister's criminal justice review. It was raised by experts and other community stakeholders at the series of criminal justice roundtables hosted by the Minister of Justice throughout Canada over the past 2 years. This thorough consultative process, Mr. Speaker, included a total of 20 roundtables with at least one in every province and territory. Mental health professionals, as well as representatives from traditionally marginalized communities, including Indigenous and other racialized populations, featured prominently amongst the participants. The roundtable held in Vancouver in August 2016 was explicitly focused on mental health. At that event, our government heard in no uncertain terms that our criminal justice system must do a better job at responding to mental illness. Experts in the field, as well as those with first-hand criminal justice experience, explained that addressing mental health is one of the critical ways our government can reduce crime, and in doing so, create safer and more prosperous communities throughout Canada. Mr. Speaker, not only must we recognize mental health issues amongst those already involved in the criminal justice system, but by improving the mental health of our citizens before they engage in criminal behavior, we can prevent longer-term struggles which ultimately deprive our society of the full potential of those people. The idea is borne out in many of the stories and first-hand accounts that we have heard from Canadians throughout the roundtable process. A typical story, one that is all too often true in our society, Mr. Speaker, frequently begins with a young person from a marginalized community. That person will experience symptoms of mental distress, often beginning with depression or anxiety, but they will go unnoticed because of a lack of institutional capacity or social support. The young person's mental state will deteriorate, leading to lower performance at school, social withdrawal, and poor decision-making. The person's first involvement with the criminal justice system often is pursuant to a minor offense, such as a low-value theft or mischief. Nevertheless, he or she is convicted and most likely on a second offense is sentenced to a short period in custody. At this stage, Mr. Speaker, the system fails to recognize the presence of worsening mental illness. Once inside the criminal justice system, the youth is exposed to an environment which aggravates rather than treats their mental health and identifies with older, more serious offenders. Upon returning to the community, the young person now suffers from a worsening, untreated mental illness and lacks the tools to effectively reintegrate. The unfortunate reality is that this person is now far more likely to reoffend and to live a life of continued criminal behavior. Mr. Speaker, this story should not surprise any member of this House. And while it is merely an example, our experience, including that gained through our own government's consultation process, has shown that this type of scenario continues to present itself in Canadian society. It is because of stories like these that I commend the sponsor for his commitment to addressing mental health in the criminal justice system through Bill C-375. As I read the proposal, it would essentially codify the current practice of including mental health information in a pre-sentence report where that information is readily available. In my view, Mr. Speaker, this bill would not compel the offender to provide information about their mental health situation against their wishes, nor would it provide the court with the power to order the production of mental health records or empower them to order an assessment of the mental condition of the offender. Mr. Speaker, I understand that it is already common practice in many jurisdictions for the offender to provide information about their mental health to a probation officer where they feel it is beneficial to them. Therefore, in my view, the practical result of this bill would be to signal to a sentencing judge that this information is a relevant consideration at sentencing. As I was reviewing the bill, I considered how such a proposal might fit within the broader goals and mandate of the Minister of Justice. Mr. Speaker, the criminal justice system must protect all Canadians and keep our communities safe, but it must also protect the rights of all Canadians. Our government is committed to ensuring that the criminal law meets the highest standards of equity, fairness, and respect for the rule of law. Healthy and safe communities are built upon a criminal justice system that treats the individuals with whom it interacts with respect, dignity, and in a manner that always upholds the rights and freedoms afforded to all by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Mr. Speaker. I think such a proposal could be seen as complementing our government's broader objectives of improving access to mental health care services for all Canadians. For example, Mr. Speaker, as members of this House will know, our government made a historic investment in mental health in Budget 2017. $11 billion of federal money is being transferred to the provinces and territories over the next 10 years, almost half of which is to be dedicated to improving access to mental health and addiction services. In addition, Mr. Speaker, Budget 2017 committed $118.2 million over 5 years to improve mental health supports for First Nations and also for Inuit peoples. This money will be provided directly to communities so that they can specifically tailor programs to meet their individual needs. This funding, Mr. Speaker, is in addition to the $69 million over 3 years announced in 2016 for immediate mental health needs and the more than $300 million provided annually to support culturally relevant mental wellness services for Canada's Indigenous communities. These, Mr. Speaker, are significant and historical investments in frontline mental health services, and they will benefit all Canadians, not just those who find themselves at odds with the criminal justice system. These upstream investments in mental health services could prevent a mentally ill person from coming into contact with the criminal justice system in the first place. Investing resources in our currently saturated mental health care system could decrease the likelihood that the criminal justice system becomes the default method of dealing with these individuals, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to just briefly reflect on the communication I had with members of my own community, my riding of Mississauga Lakeshore constituents, who have repeatedly written to me on the importance of mental health in Canada, particularly with respect to young people, with our Indigenous communities, increasingly also with our seniors. And they underscore in their correspondence to me, Mr. Speaker, the importance for the government and for all parliamentarians to take mental health seriously, to integrate mental health systematically into our policy decision-making processes, and to backstop the need to invest in mental health with adequate resources and investments, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank the sponsor again for the step he took in introducing this bill into the House of Commons, and through his own framework, his own lens of criminal justice and its intersection with mental health needs in Canada, move the yardstick forward. Mr. Speaker, thank you again for the opportunity to discuss this important proposal, and I look forward to continued debate on this important private member's bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.